One summer, I set out to ride from Bergen, a city in the south of Norway, to Tromsø, a city in the north, also known as the capital of the Arctic. I gave myself a month to ride the 2,500 kilometers between these two cities, camping along the way, in the wild as much as possible. But rather than start this ride to the Arctic Circle by heading north, I instead made my way south and east. The reason was simple. I wanted to see a rock. 1,100 meters above sea level, Trolltunga, or Trolltunga in English, projects out into an abyss with nothing below but empty space for 700 meters. Located near Odda, a fjordside town 170 kilometers from Bergen, getting to the trail would take me a few days. On my first day, I rode until the sun set, which was just before midnight. Later in the trip, further north, the sun didn't set at all. When darkness finally came that first night, I put up my tent on a large rock beside a river and slept until the sun returned. On my second and third days, I followed the coast of Hardangerfjord, one of the longest fjords in the world. The road passes enormous cliffs and waterfalls, which descend from desolate glacial plateaus far, far above. It was early afternoon by the time I made it to the start of the ascent, which begins with a steep road from the village of Tisdal. I quickly noticed that, while many people were coming down, few others were heading up. I rode until I could no more, then began to push. As hard as it was, getting my 40 kilos of bike and stuff up that road, things were about to get a lot harder. At 800 meters, the road ended and the trail began. It at first crossed little streams and traversed big, smooth boulders. But before long, I was faced with the prospect of climbing an enormous rock staircase that led up into the clouds. "No, come on bro," said one man, a horrified look on his face. He mimed locking my bike to a tree as he continued on his way down. "It's impossible," said another man, staggering back down after his climb to the top. One girl just stopped dead and stared as I clambered past with my bike. "Is it far?" I asked, just to break the silence. Yeah," she said, astounded by my naivety. It was early evening when I reached a plateau. I started along a mud path that ran beside small lakes formed from melting ice. My bike and I were now 1,000 meters above sea level, and the path occasionally disappeared between patches of snow. Everyone else was gone. Dark clouds materialized, and a cold rain began to fall, and I remembered reading about all the people that need rescuing from the trails each year. I started to question whether I had been too blasé about my little expedition. Maybe all the comments and stares of those coming down were justified. I reassured myself that if the weather worsened further, I could set up my tent, put on some warm clothes, and wait it out. But the rain eased and the clouds dispersed. When I arrived at the end of the plateau, an immense blue lake came into view far below. It was filled by wisping waterfalls that fell from towering cliffs. The cliff tops were snow-white, though the area around the lake was pine green. I recalled the most beautiful landscapes I had ever seen, and nodded to myself as I thought, yeah, this might take first place. Still several kilometers from Trolltunga, I staggered onwards, my head hanging over my chest, my eyes vaguely directed at the sludge below. I realized when I looked up that I had lost the red paint markers that lead the way. Setting my bike down, I trudged to the top of a mound to see where I was, near the edge of a cliff, beyond which were the lake and the waterfalls I'd seen earlier, now hours before. I never saw Norway any darker than I did then. I was in the south, and the pink of twilight had enveloped the surrounding white peaks. I had an idea of which way to go, but I had had enough for one day. I located a patch of flat ground between two pools of melted snow, set up my tent, and resolved to keep going the next day. In the morning, to lighten my load, I left my tent and some things behind. I kept my bike with me, however. I was determined to join the ranks of the few foolish enough to bring a bike to Trolltunga. With less weight to carry and most of the elevation already gained, the beauty of the landscapes eclipsed whatever pain I felt. I leapt between rocks surrounded by glimmering pools until, at last, Trolltunga came into sight. It was barely mid-morning, but already several people were there. I handed my phone to a young Ukrainian guy when I arrived, then got in line to have my picture taken. When my turn came, I walked my bike to the tip of the tongue and sat with my feet over the edge, nothing but air below for 700 meters. I turned towards the Ukrainian, waved, hopped on my bike, then rolled back to the base of the rock. I didn't hang around after. The growing crowds, of which I was a part, diminished my sense of awe. It made me uneasy to see that majestic rock, which I imagined had enjoyed its previous solitude, treated as a mere stage for posing tourists. Besides, I still had to pick up my tent and start the long hike back down.